Clara walked slowly along the dusty road, holding her little boy Eli's hand. The sun was bright, but the day felt heavy. They had been walking for hours, and both of them were tired. Clara tried her best to smile at Eli every time he looked up at her, but inside she felt weak. She had not eaten in 2 days, and Eli had eaten only a few bites of an old biscuit the night before. The boy was brave, but she could see how tired he was by the way he dragged his feet. They had come from far away, leaving behind everything they once knew. Clara did not talk about the place they left, and Eli did not ask. They both understood that some things were better forgotten. All they needed now was safety, rest, and something warm to eat. But in this new town, they had no money, no friends, and no place to stay. Clara kept walking because she had no other choice. She needed food for her little boy. Every time Eli's stomach made a small sound, her heart felt tight. She whispered small promises to him. "We'll find something soon, sweetheart. Just a little longer." Eli nodded, trusting her completely. As they entered the small western town, Clara noticed people rushing about, some carrying baskets, some tending to horses, others sweeping the front of their shops. Everyone looked busy and well-fed. The smell of warm bread floated through the air. Eli breathed in deeply, and his eyes followed the smell like he was being pulled by an invisible string. Clara followed his gaze and saw the general store. In the window, behind the glass, sat a loaf of bread, fresh, soft, and perfect. She could almost taste it just by looking at it. Her mind began to race. She had nothing to trade, nothing to sell, but she had to try. She couldn't watch her child grow weaker. She squeezed Eli's hand gently. "Let's go inside," she said softly. Eli nodded, though he walked slowly, every step looking like it took great effort. Inside the store, the air was cooler, and the smell of bread was even stronger. Eli stared at the loaf on the counter, and Clara gently placed her hand on his shoulder to calm him. She walked up to the shopkeeper, a tall man with a thick mustache and a serious face. He looked at Clara, and then at Eli. But he did not smile. Clara spoke carefully. "Sir, my son is hungry. We've been traveling. I don't have money. But I was wondering if there is any small work I can do. Maybe sweep, or clean something. Just enough for a piece of bread for him." The man looked her up and down. Clara lowered her eyes, not wanting to seem rude. After a long moment, the shopkeeper walked around the counter and studied her hair. It was long, soft, and fell past her shoulders in gentle waves. She had taken care of it even during hard times because it was the only thing she felt she still had control over. The shopkeeper rubbed his chin. "I can give you a piece of bread," he said slowly. Clara looked up, hope rising in her eyes. "But," he added, "you must give me something in return." Clara nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. I can do any work." "No work," he interrupted. "I want your hair, all of it." Clara felt her breath catch. She reached up and touched her hair as if checking to see it was still there. Her hair had been important to her since childhood. It was the one thing people always said was beautiful. Even during difficult days, she brushed it every morning to remind herself that life still held small bits of grace. But when she looked down at Eli, his small face pale, his eyes tired, her heart made the decision for her. She could lose many things, but she could not lose him. She could not let him go hungry. She swallowed hard. "If that's what it takes," she whispered, "I'll do it. I'll do it." The shopkeeper nodded and walked to a drawer, taking out a pair of scissors. The sound of metal scraping made Clara's stomach twist. She knelt down beside Eli. "It's okay," she said softly, cupping his face with her hands. "Mommy will be fine. We just need a little food." Eli's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to, Mama." Clara smiled gently, brushing his cheek with her thumb. "A mother does many things for her child. This is a small thing if it helps you." But inside, she felt her heart cracking. She didn't want to lose her hair, but she wanted her child to live even more. She stood up straight and closed her eyes as the shopkeeper approached. scissors in hand. She tried to steady her breathing. Just a moment, she told herself. Just a moment. And Eli will have bread. The shopkeeper reached out a hand, ready to lift her hair, when suddenly, a shadow fell across the floor. A cowboy had stepped through the doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn boots, a dusty coat, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his eyes. His presence filled the room quietly, like someone who didn't need to speak to be noticed. He paused, taking in the situation without a word. Clara standing still with her eyes closed, the scissors raised near her head, Eli clutching her dress with wide, frightened eyes. The cowboy's jaw tightened slightly. "What's happening here?" he asked calmly. Clara opened her eyes and stepped back slightly, embarrassed. "It's nothing, sir. Just trying to get my son something to eat," the shopkeeper answered before she could continue. "She wants bread. This is what she's offering." The cowboy's brows drew together. He looked from Clara to Eli and then at the scissors. Something about the situation clearly troubled him, but he didn't raise his voice. Instead, he spoke in a steady, sure tone. "There must be another way," he said. Clara shook her head quickly. "Sir, please. It's fine," I agreed. Her voice trembled slightly, and she looked down, trying to hide the shame she felt. She didn't want help from strangers. She didn't want pity. She only wanted food for her child. The cowboy stepped forward gently. "Ma'am," he said, "no one should have to give up something like that just to feed a child." Clara's hands began to shake. This stranger didn't understand. She didn't have choices the way others did. When life pushed her, she could only bend. Eli held onto her tighter. The cowboy slowly removed his hat, revealing kind, steady eyes. He looked at the shopkeeper. "How much for the bread?" he asked. The shopkeeper looked annoyed, but he answered, "A few cents. And how much for enough food for both of them to get through today?" The cowboy continued. The shopkeeper hesitated. "Depends what you want." The cowboy didn't blink. "Enough. Whatever it is, I'll pay," Clara gasped softly. "Sir, no. I can't let you do that." The cowboy finally looked directly at her. His voice softened. "Ma'am, you're not taking anything from me. I'm giving it freely. There's a difference." Clara felt tears well in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them back. She didn't want to cry in front of strangers. She didn't want her son to see her cry again. The cowboy reached into his coat, pulled out a few coins, and placed them firmly on the counter. "Give them what they need," he said. "And leave the lady's dignity where it is." The shopkeeper grumbled but took the coins. He wrapped a loaf of bread, some dried fruit, and a small pack of biscuits, pushing them across the counter. Clara stared at the food, hardly believing it. The cowboy picked up the bundle and placed it gently into her hands. "Take it," he said kindly. "Your boy needs strength. You do too." Eli looked up at the cowboy with shining eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "I don't know how to repay." "You don't owe me anything," the cowboy said softly. "Sometimes we help, simply because we can." Clara held the food close to her chest, feeling the weight of kindness settle over her like a warm blanket. For the first time in days, hope touched her heart. As she and Eli stepped out of the store, the cowboy followed them into the bright afternoon light. Clara still felt unsure, still tired. But now she was no longer alone. Something had changed in that small moment, something she couldn't yet describe. But she knew one thing clearly. A stranger had stopped her from losing something she treasured. A stranger had seen her pain and answered with kindness. And because of that, her child would eat today. And that was enough to keep her walking forward. Boone Carter, the cowboy who had stepped into the store, walked beside Clara and Eli as they moved slowly down the main street. The sun warmed the wooden sidewalks, and a soft breeze carried the smell of hay and horses from the nearby stables. Clara held the bag of food close to her chest, afraid that if she loosened her grip, it might somehow disappear. Eli walked a little more confidently now, as if a simple loaf of bread had placed strength back into his small legs. Clara still felt unsure around the cowboy. She was not used to strangers helping her. Most of the time, People walked by without a glance, too busy with their own lives to notice a tired woman and her hungry child. But this man had stepped in at the very moment she needed help the most. She didn't know what to say, or how to thank him properly. Boone walked with calm steps, his hat casting a shadow over his thoughtful face. He didn't say much at first. He understood that Clara needed time to breathe and gather herself. She looked shaken, not only from hunger but from the weight of everything she had been carrying inside. Eli looked up at Boone with wide, curious eyes. Boone smiled down at him, a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Because sometimes," he said, "you see someone who needs help, and you don't wait for a reason to give it." Eli nodded slowly, as if he was trying to understand a grown-up truth. They reached a small bench under the shade of a large oak tree. Boone stopped and gestured toward it. "Let's sit for a bit," he suggested. "You both look worn out." Clara hesitated, but Eli had already climbed onto the bench, swinging his small legs. She took a slow breath and sat down, placing the food beside her. Boone remained standing for a moment, leaning slightly against a fence post. "Do you have a place to stay?" he asked gently. Clara shook her head. "No, sir. We've been walking for days. We thought maybe this town would have work, or somewhere we could rest, but we haven't found anything yet." Boone studied her tired face. She looked like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. "You didn't come here for nothing," he said softly. "We'll find you a safe place." Clara looked down at her hands. "I don't want to cause trouble. You've already done more than enough." "You're not causing trouble," Boone said. "You're a mother doing her best. That's nothing to be ashamed of." Clara felt her eyes sting again. She turned her head slightly so Eli wouldn't see the tears forming. She didn't want to seem weak in front of her son. She wanted him to believe she could protect him, even when she didn't feel strong herself. Boone crouched down in front of Eli. "How old are you, son?" "I'm 6, Eli said proudly, lifting his chin. 6? Boone laughed softly. "That's a good age. Strong age, too." Eli smiled a little, clearly pleased by the compliment. Boone stood again and looked at Clara. "There's a boarding house run by a kind widow named Mrs. June. She's helped folks before, people passing through or needing a place for a few days. I can take you there." Purportant. Clara bit her lip. "How much does it cost?" Boone understood her concern. "I'll take care of it, just until you get settled." Clara shook her head quickly. "Sir, I can't let you spend money on us. You've already bought food." Boone interrupted her gently. "Ma'am, you're not taking advantage. You didn't ask for trouble. You're just trying to stand on your feet again. Helping you and your boy, that's not a burden." Clara looked away for a moment, her shoulders rising and falling with a shaky breath. She wasn't used to kindness that came without a price. Every step of her journey had been filled with fear, doubt, and difficult choices. And now, here was someone offering help without expecting anything in return. It felt strange, almost unreal. She finally whispered, If you truly don't mind, then thank you. I don't know what else to do right now." She finally whispered, "I don't know what else to do right now." Boone nodded, satisfied with her answer. Then it settled. As they walked toward the boarding house, Clara noticed that people on the street nodded at Boone with familiarity. They respected him. He seemed like someone who had earned trust, someone who carried himself quietly but strongly. Eli walked between them, nibbling on a small piece of the bread Boone had bought. Clara watched him eat with relief. Every bite he took eased some of the tightness in her chest. Boone pointed toward a warm-looking house with a porch and rocking chair out front. "That's the place." The widow, Mrs. June, stepped outside just as they arrived. She was a round-faced woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore a blue apron, dusted with flour from her baking. "Well now," she said with a gentle smile. "Boone Carter, what brings you here?" Boone tipped his hat politely. "Need a favor, Mrs. June. This lady and her boy need a room." Mrs. June's eyes softened as she looked at Clara and Eli. She saw the exhaustion in their faces immediately. "Of course they do," she said warmly. "Come inside, dear. Both of you." Clara opened her mouth to protest. Habit made her want to refuse, but Mrs. June was already holding the door open with a welcoming smile. Something about the woman reminded Clara of a warm memory from long ago. Something she couldn't fully remember but felt in her heart. Inside, the house smelled like freshly baked pie and clean linens. The air was warm and soft, unlike the harsh roads they had been walking for days. Clara felt her body relax, almost against her will. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Mrs. June led them to a small but cozy room with 2 beds, soft blankets, and a window that overlooked a small garden. "This will be yours for now," she said. "You two look like you could use some rest." Clara touched the smooth quilt on the bed. It felt unreal, too gentle for someone who had slept on hard ground and cold benches for so long. Boone stayed by the doorway, giving Clara space. She turned toward him. "I don't know how to say thank you," she whispered. "I mean it." "You don't need to say anything," Boone replied. "Just get some rest, both of you." Clara nodded slowly. She didn't want him to leave yet, but she also didn't know why. Maybe because his presence made the room feel even safer. Maybe because he had stepped into her life right before things could have gone terribly wrong. Eli climbed onto one of the beds and lay down happily. "Mama, it's soft," he said with a wide smile. "Really soft." Clara smiled back, tears finally falling, but these tears felt different. They weren't from fear or hopelessness. They were from relief. Boone watched the moment quietly, not wanting to intrude on their emotion. When Clara wiped her eyes and looked at him again, he spoke softly. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Make sure everything's all right." Clara nodded. "Thank you, Boone." He tipped his hat again, then turned to leave. Clara watched him walk down the hallway, his boots making soft sounds against the wooden floor. She didn't know why a stranger had chosen to step into her life, but she knew one thing with certainty. He had stopped her at the exact moment she had come close to losing something precious. He had given her and Eli kindness, when the world had given them nothing but struggle. He had offered them care without expecting anything, and that small act had changed everything. She looked at Eli, who was already falling asleep, his face peaceful and content. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt hope gently returning to her heart. And it all started because one cowboy decided to step forward and say, "There must be another way." Clara woke the next morning to the soft sound of birds outside the window. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The gentle sunlight, the warm blanket, the quiet room, none of it felt familiar. Then she saw Eli curled up on the bed beside her, sleeping peacefully with his hands tucked under his cheek. Her heart softened. She remembered everything. Mrs. June's kindness, the cozy room, and Boone Carter, the cowboy who changed everything simply by caring. For the first time in many days, Clara felt the heaviness in her chest lift slightly. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms. Her body still felt tired, but it was a softer kind of tired, as if her muscles were finally allowed to rest. Eli stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw where he was, his face lit up with pure joy. "Mama," he whispered. "We're really here?" "We're here," Clara replied, brushing his hair gently. "And you slept well?" "It was the best sleep ever," he said, sitting up with a big smile. Clara laughed softly. Seeing her son so happy gave her strength she didn't know she had left. A light knock came at the door. Before Clara could stand, Mrs. June stepped in with a tray carrying warm porridge, milk, and a small plate of sweet rolls. "Good morning, dears," Mrs. June said with her gentle voice. "Thought you might be hungry." Clara stood quickly, startled by the kindness. "Ma'am, this is too much. You don't have to." "Nonsense," Mrs. June said, waving her hand. "A body can't think or work without food. Eat while it's warm." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He reached for a sweet roll and bit into it happily. Clara felt her throat tighten again. The simple act of seeing her child eat without worry felt like a blessing too big to describe. After breakfast, Mrs. June showed Clara the small chores she could help with, washing a few dishes, sweeping the hallway, folding some towels. Nothing heavy, nothing tiring. Clara appreciated the chance to work. It made her feel like she was contributing, not just receiving. As she worked, she noticed how peaceful the boarding house felt. Sunlight fell through the windows in warm patterns. The floors were polished, and the soft ticking of a clock filled the air. It was a place that seemed to understand tired souls and offer them rest. Later that morning, Boone returned, just as he had promised. Clara heard the faint sound of boots approaching the house, and her heart fluttered unexpectedly. Eli heard too, and rushed to the door. When he saw the cowboy standing there, Eli ran forward with excitement. "Boone!" he cried. Boone smiled down at him. "Morning, partner. You look stronger today." Eli nodded proudly. Mrs. June gave us sweet rolls. Boone laughed. "Then you're in good hands." Clara walked over, brushing off her apron. "Good morning," she said softly. Boone tipped his hat. "Looks like you both slept well." "We did," Clara replied. "I can't thank you enough for bringing us here." "I'm glad you're safe," Boone said simply. Mrs. June joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Boone, you brought good folks into my home. And sweet mercy. The boy eats like a starved little bird. He'll be healthy in no time." Clara smiled, her cheeks warming. "Thank you, ma'am, truly." Mrs. June nodded. "Now, Boone, if you're planning to take them into town today, make sure that boy doesn't skip lunch." Boone chuckled. "Yes, ma'am." Clara blinked. "Into town?" Boone nodded. "Thought we could get you what you need. Maybe some clothes. Maybe see if anyone's hiring. Folks are always looking for good help." Clara hesitated. "Boone, you've already done so much. I don't want to depend on you for everything." "You're not depending on me," he said gently. "You're rebuilding. I'm just helping you lay the first stones." Clara lowered her gaze, touched by his words. They walked into town together, Clara, Eli holding her hand, and Boone walking beside them. People greeted Boone as they passed. Some nodded, others waved. It was clear he was respected in this town. At the clothing store, Boone helped pick out simple dresses for Clara and sturdy shoes for Eli. Clara tried to protest when Boone paid, but he simply shook his head. "You'll pay it forward someday," he said. "That's enough for me." Afterwards, he took them to a small cafe owned by a friendly older couple. Eli enjoyed a bowl of warm soup, while Boone and Clara sat across from each other. Clara watched Eli eat, her heart full. Boone watched Clara, noticing how she relaxed a little more with each moment. "You look lighter today," Boone said quietly. Clara looked up. "I feel lighter. I can breathe again. Yesterday, I felt like I was falling. And you," he shook his head gently. "You were standing. Just needed a hand to keep steady." Clara felt her eyes warm. She turned her face slightly, pretending to watch Eli to hide her emotion. After lunch, they walked toward the bakery on the far side of town. The smell of warm bread drifted through the air, and Clara breathed it in deeply. "This place is always hiring," Boone said. "Maybe they'll take you on." Clara's heart fluttered. "A bakery? Thought you might like that," Boone replied. Inside, the owner, Mr. Whitby, greeted them with a friendly smile. Boone explained Clara's situation without revealing anything personal. He simply said she was new in town, hard-working, and looking for honest work. Mr. Whitby studied Clara for a moment, then offered her a kind smile. "Come tomorrow morning. Let's see how you do kneading dough. If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach." Clara felt her breath catch. "Sir, thank you. I'll be here." Boone looked at her with quiet pride. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they walked back toward the boarding house. Eli skipped ahead, energized by the good food and excitement of the day. Clara walked slower, her thoughts spinning. Every step felt like she was moving toward a new life, one she hadn't imagined even a day ago. Just before they reached the house, Clara stopped. Boone paused and looked back at her. "You've done more than help us," Clara said softly. Boone's expression softened. "Hope belongs to you. Always did. I just reminded you it was still there." Clara couldn't speak for a moment. She looked down at the small bag of new clothes, then at Eli, who was laughing with Mrs. June on the porch. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that things might truly get better. Boone tipped his hat again. "I'll check in tomorrow." Clara nodded. "I'd like that." As Boone walked away, Clara watched him. There was something steady, something honorable in the way he carried himself. She didn't know what he meant to her yet, but she knew what he meant to her life. He brought light into a moment that had been full of darkness. He gave her strength when she thought she had none left. He saw her not as a burden, but as someone worth helping. And because of that, the path ahead didn't seem frightening anymore. Clara looked at her son, then at the quiet street, the warm house, the setting sun. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Not just for the night, but perhaps for the future. The next few weeks passed slowly, but gently, like soft ripples moving across a quiet pond. Every morning, Clara woke before sunrise, washed her face with warm water, Mrs. June placed near the door, and tied her hair back neatly. She would then walk to the bakery where Mr. Whitby waited with a friendly smile and a clean apron. The first days were difficult. Her hands shook from tiredness, and her arms ached from kneading dough for hours. But she pushed through, remembering her promise to herself and to Eli, that she would build a better life for him no matter how hard it felt. Mr. Whitby was patient. He didn't rush her, and he didn't judge her. He taught her slowly, showing her how to fold the dough with care, how to watch the color of the bread as it baked, and how to greet customers kindly. Over time, Clara's movements became smoother and more confident. She even laughed once or twice during the busy morning hours, surprising herself with the sound. Eli also grew stronger each day. Mrs. June adored him and often gave him small tasks, watering the flowers, feeding the birds that visited the garden, or helping with the light sweeping. He enjoyed every bit of it, and often talked excitedly about the birds he saw or the shape of the clouds above the town. Boone visited often, though never too long and never in a way that made Clara feel pressured. He always carried himself with gentle respect. He would knock lightly on the door frame, greet Mrs. June, and ask Eli about his day. When he spoke to Clara, it was always with kindness, never pity. He asked how work was going, whether she was feeling stronger, and if anything troubled her. His presence brought a quiet comfort, like a soft blanket on a cold evening. Clara noticed things about him little by little. The way his eyes softened when Eli ran to greet him, the way he listened carefully when she spoke, the way he never talked about himself, unless she asked. Boone had a calmness that steadied her, even when she felt overwhelmed. One afternoon, after her shift at the bakery, Clara walked home with a small bag of leftover rolls Mr. Whitby gave her. The sun was just beginning to lower, casting a warm golden light across the town. She noticed Boone waiting near the entrance of Mrs. June's garden, leaning lightly against the fence. Eli ran to him immediately, excited to show Boone a drawing he had made earlier. Boone crouched down to admire the picture. "That's mighty fine work," he said, gently tapping the boy's nose. Eli giggled proudly. Clara approached them with a soft smile. Boone stood and tipped his hat slightly. "How was the bakery today?" "I'm learning," Clara said, brushing a bit of flour from her sleeve. "Mr. Whitby says I'm improving." "I'm sure you are," Boone replied warmly. "You seem like the kind of person who works hard at whatever she does." Quote. Clara looked down for a moment, touched by his faith in her. She wasn't used to people believing in her abilities. It felt nice, but also unfamiliar. As the days passed, Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She walked with more confidence. Her face looked brighter. She spoke more gently, but with strength. She laughed more often. She even began to sleep without waking up in fear or uncertainty. The town, once unfamiliar and intimidating, now felt like a place she could call home. Eli thrived as well. His cheeks grew fuller, his steps quicker. He spent afternoons playing with other children under Mrs. June's watchful eye. He often returned with stories about frogs he tried to catch, about birds he saw flying over the barn, about dreams of helping his mother at the bakery when he grew older. One evening, Mrs. June brought out a pot of warm stew and invited Boone to stay for dinner. The four of them sat around the small wooden table, sharing stories and laughter. Clara noticed how easily Boone fit into the space, how naturally he spoke with Eli, and how respectfully he spoke with Mrs. June. She found herself studying him but quickly looked away each time her gaze lingered too long. After dinner, Boone helped Eli with a small wooden puzzle, while Clara watched quietly, feeling an unexpected warmth fill her heart. It wasn't romance, at least. Not yet. It was something gentler, something that came from trust, gratitude, and the quiet understanding of someone who walked into her life when she needed it most. But Boone was a traveler. He had his own path, his own journeys, his own reasons for moving from one town to the next. Clara knew this, and she tried not to think too much about the day he would leave. Still, the thought lingered, and that day came sooner than she expected. One morning, she stepped outside the boarding house to find Boone saddling his horse. His hat was tilted low, and his saddlebag looked filled. Clara's breath caught for a moment. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't ready. Boone looked up when he heard her steps. "Morning," he said softly. "You're leaving?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Boone nodded. "There's some work waiting for me out past the ridge. Can't stay in one place too long." Quote. Clara folded her hands together, trying to steady her heart. "I see." Eli ran out, his face falling when he noticed the horse. "Boone, are you going somewhere?" Boone crouched down and ruffled the boy's hair gently. "Just for a while, partner. You keep helping your mama, all right?" Eli nodded, but his eyes were sad. He hugged Boone tightly. Boone hugged him back with the same gentle care he always showed. Clara swallowed the lump forming in her throat. Boone stood and faced her. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. No words seemed right. No words felt enough. "You've helped us more than you know," Clara said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "You didn't just give us food. You gave us a chance." Boone's eyes softened deeply. "You were stronger than you believed," he said. "I just made sure you didn't break." Clara felt tears rise, but she blinked them back. She didn't want him to leave with sadness in her eyes. Boone placed his hat over his heart for a moment, a quiet, respectful gesture. Then he stepped into the stirrup and mounted his horse. "If you ever need anything," he said, looking down at her and Eli. "This town knows how to find me." Clara nodded. "Be safe." Boone tipped his hat, turned his horse gently, and began to ride down the dusty road. Eli waved until Boone disappeared behind the hill. Clara stood silently, the wind lifting small strands of her hair as she watched the empty road. She didn't know when Boone would return, or if he even would, but she did know one thing with absolute certainty. She and Eli were safe now. They had a home. She had a job. She had strength she didn't know she possessed. And all of it began the day he stopped her from making a desperate choice for a piece of bread. Clara turned toward the bakery, where a new day of work waited. Eli ran ahead, laughing as he jumped over the small stones on the path. Clara watched him with a full heart, knowing that their future was no longer filled with fear, but with hope and possibility. Even though Boone had ridden away, the kindness he left behind stayed with her like a warm echo. A reminder that there were good people in the world. People who stepped forward not for rewards, but simply because they believed in doing right. Clara lifted her head, feeling the morning sun touch her face. A new life had begun.